People think working the night shift at a local radio station is easy. It isn't. The world feels different after midnight. The air turns heavy and every sound travels too far. I used to run the overnight desk at WNRO, a small-town AM station in northern Michigan. Most nights it was simple work: read the weather reports, cue the ads, monitor the signal, and keep the broadcast running. There were usually only two of us, me and the tech operator, Dennis. Dennis had been there for years. He knew the old transmitters like they were his children. The man barely spoke, just sat in the control booth behind a glass wall, watching the sound meters. He'd sometimes hum along to the jingles, low and off-key. I liked the quiet. After 2 a.m., when the traffic lights blinked yellow and the whole town seemed asleep, the station felt cut off from the world. The broadcast tower stood alone on a patch of cleared land behind the woods. On foggy nights, the red warning light at the top vanished completely, and all you could hear was the faint buzz of power through the cables. The only window in my office looked out toward that tower. I'd watch it sometimes when the news feed was slow, sipping my coffee, trying to keep my eyes open. Nothing ever happened out there, until that one night. It was a Tuesday in late October. I remember because the weather report kept repeating the word unseasonably warm. The air was still, no wind at all. Around 1:15 a.m., I started hearing faint feedback through the headphones. Not static exactly, but something that sounded like a voice buried in the signal. At first I thought it was interference from another station. I called over to Dennis through the glass, and he just waved without looking up. I asked if he was getting it on his end. He shook his head, said the line was clean. It was strange, though. Every time I paused the feed to listen, the sound stopped. When I resumed, it came back, like something hiding in the transmission itself. I didn't think much of it at first, but Dennis did. He looked up once, finally, and said quietly, "You heard it too, didn't you?" I laughed when he said that, but Dennis didn't smile. He just kept staring through the glass, his headphones half off, listening to something I couldn't hear. The light from the soundboard threw a dull red glow across his face, and he looked pale, almost gray. I asked again what he meant, but he only said, "Leave the feed on." The hum through my headset deepened. Beneath it I could swear I heard movement, like distant breathing, slow and steady, weaving through the static. Every few seconds a faint click would echo like a key tapping against metal. I switched channels, checked the wiring, even unplugged the mic. The sound didn't stop. At 2:07 a.m. the power flickered just once. The tower light outside went dark, then came back. The sound meters jumped for no reason, like the whole system caught a pulse. Dennis stood up fast, staring at the monitor that showed the tower feed. It was a grainy black and white live shot, nothing out there but mist. But he leaned closer to the screen, squinting, and said, "There's someone by the base." I looked. There was no one. Only fog and the faint outline of the ladder running up the tower. I told him it was just interference. The old cameras sometimes glitched when the signal drifted. He didn't answer. A few minutes later the breathing grew louder. Not through the headphones now, but through the actual speaker feed. The air in the room felt charged, heavy. I heard words forming in the low frequency, slow, broken syllables that sounded like a transmission from underwater. Dennis switched off his mic and spoke into the intercom. "Whatever it is, it's on the station frequency. Not from outside." Then he went silent. I watched as he walked toward the equipment room, the one behind the control booth. He didn't take a flashlight. He just opened the door, stepped inside, and let it close behind him. I sat there listening. The sound shifted again, clearer now. A whisper, almost familiar. My own name. The signal dropped. Everything went quiet. Even the hum. That kind of silence doesn't happen in a running station. Not unless something breaks. I waited for Dennis to come back. He never did. I went to the equipment room after 10 minutes. The air was colder there, like the AC had kicked in, though the vents were still. The lights flickered, dim and yellow. Dennis wasn't inside. His chair was pushed back, his headset still hanging, one earpiece crackling faintly. The signal light on the transmitter blinked, showing an active broadcast. But I had cut the feed. I leaned in close and heard the whisper again, steady and low. It wasn't random this time. It was a voice. "Don't look up." I froze, the room filled with a low hum that grew sharper, almost painful. I turned toward the window that faced the tower. The red light at the top was gone. In its place was a glow, white and trembling, like something alive was pulsing inside the metal. Then the signal cut off for good. No one ever found Dennis. I grew up in a small town in Maine where everyone knew everyone. We had one gas station, one school, and one street light that flickered no matter how many times they fixed it. Nothing really happened there. The kind of place where news was about whose dog got loose or who crashed their pickup in the ditch again. I moved away when I turned 18 and didn't look back for over 15 years. Then out of nowhere I got a call from the sheriff. My father had passed away. Heart failure, he said. It didn't hit me at first. We hadn't talked much since I left, but I went back for the funeral anyway. When I got there, the town looked almost the same, but something felt different. People avoided eye contact. The gas station was still open, but the windows were covered with newspaper from the inside. Even the church had its doors locked. That never used to happen. I stayed in my father's old house. The place smelled like dust and pine. Everything was where he'd left it. His jacket on the chair, his boots by the door. On the kitchen table was a stack of papers, mostly unpaid bills, and a small wooden box. The box had no lock, just carvings around the edges that looked like eyes. That night I couldn't sleep. I heard what sounded like kids laughing outside. It was late, almost 2 a.m, and I thought maybe the neighbors had company. But when I looked through the window, there was no one there, just fog rolling in from the forest. The next morning, I asked the neighbor, Mrs. Shaw, if there were new families in town. She looked at me like he'd said something strange. "Aren't been any kids around here for years," she said. Then she shut her door. That night I heard the laughter again, louder this time. I checked the window. In the fog, I saw small shapes running between the trees. Fast. Too fast to be normal. I turned on the porch light, but by the time it came on, everything was quiet again. I thought maybe I was just tired. Grief does things to your head, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. The third night was worse. The laughter didn't stop. It came in short bursts like whispers between trees. I tried ignoring it, but every time I started to drift off, a new sound woke me. A knock on the wall, scratching under the floorboards. Light footsteps just outside the door. I checked the clock. 3:12 a.m. The air inside the house was cold enough that I could see my breath. When I finally got up to look outside, the fog was thicker than ever. I could barely see the front porch. Still I heard them, small, quick feet shuffling through the gravel driveway. I called out, half angry, half scared. "Who's out there?" No answer. Just that sound again. Laughter. Short. Broken giggles, too close. Like they were right under the window. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The light cut through the fog in a single pale beam. Nothing moved. The ground was wet, soft with mud, but there were prints, tiny footprints, bare, leading toward the tree line. That's when I noticed something else. My father's wooden box was sitting on the porch railing. I hadn't touched it since I found it. I didn't even bring it outside. The carvings around the edges looked deeper now, like the eyes had been gouged wider. I took the box inside and opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small cracked marble. The paper had my father's handwriting. "If they come back, don't follow them. Don't look at them in the light." I felt cold all over. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew he wasn't talking about animals or people. The rest of the night I stayed in the living room with every light on. Around 4 a.m. the power went out. The house went pitch black. I could hear something brushing against the walls outside, circling the house slowly, dragging what sounded like sticks or bones. Then came the whispering. Not voices exactly, but a low hum, like children trying to remember a song. I covered my ears, but I could still hear it, inside my head, soft and rhythmic. It stopped when the sun came up. Everything went quiet again. I told myself I'd leave that morning, but when I stepped outside I saw something carved into the tree by the road. My name, and under it 3 small handprints. That night I didn't try to sleep. I sat in the kitchen with my father's box in front of me, waiting. The clock hit midnight. The fog rolled in. I heard them again, laughing, whispering, moving closer. I didn't turn on the light this time. From the window I saw them, small figures standing at the edge of the porch. Their faces were pale, their eyes empty and black. One of them stepped forward. It was wearing my daughter's old jacket, the same one she lost years ago, the one with her name stitched on the sleeve. I froze. My heart stopped beating for a moment. They all turned their heads toward me at once, perfectly still, perfectly silent. The box rattled. The marble inside began to glow faintly, pulsing with the sound of faint laughter. Then the front door creaked open, and I heard a voice whisper, "We're home." I was in Istanbul because the work had sent me. And because I like the way this city refuses to be tidy, I sat at a tiny cafe near the Bosporus, the market a few hundred yards away and already loud. My suit was linen and sticking to my legs with the morning heat. I had been a scientist for most of my life, which meant I learned to trust numbers more than people. I kept a small case with me at all times, the kind that fits under a seat and draws no attention. People at the market sold bread, scarves, and old books with pages soft from use. The city felt like an honest thing to me, jagged and direct. I had slept badly the night before and woke with a decision that made my stomach heavy. I had written letters, packing them in envelopes with locations and times. I had spent years in labs learning how to make things live and how to let them rest. Money bought me time, and time had made my thinking sharp and cruel. I told myself I was not a monster. I told myself I was a kind of surgeon. I told myself that the species needed trimming to survive. I am precise in my work and I hated waste. My notes fit in folders and my folders fit in that case. I had planned routes, cities, and small hidden chambers where something could wait without anyone knowing. I moved like a man who has rehearsed his own death. Careful, unhurried, oddly calm. People smiled at me or ignored me, as people do when they have their own days to fix. I watched a woman bargain over olives and thought of nothing that could stop what I had set in motion. I had buried devices where air moved, where crowds passed, where 1,000 breaths would carry what I carried. I thought about ethics in the way a surgeon thinks about an amputation, necessary and clean. My past job had taught me how to make a thing survive in the wrong body. I remember the clock on the cafe wall, and how it moved as if it did not care about the weight I carried. I wrote a short note and folded it into my pocket, a breadcrumb I may yet regret leaving. I drank coffee, black, and felt a small relief at its heat. People fed pigeons nearby and took pictures on their phones. I stood up before the town fully woke and folded the case into my hand, like a child holding a toy. I walked away from the market and toward a small airport, listening to the city keep going without me. I left Istanbul before sunrise. The plane was nearly empty, quiet except for the sound of air moving through the vents. I sat near the back and watched the wings cut through the gray sky. No one noticed me. They never do. When I reached Samarkand, the streets felt older than thought itself. Stone roads, blue tiles, faded murals. Once the center of the world, now just dust and silence. I walked through it like a ghost with a map in his hand. I wasn't here to work, not really. I came to see what would be lost. The weight of the case pressed into my palm, but it didn't feel as heavy as before. Every city changed me a little. I began to notice how easily people trusted air. Breathing, laughing, shouting into it as if it couldn't turn against them. They didn't know that I had already taught the air a new language. At a cafe near Registan Square, I sat beside two students arguing over history. One of them said civilizations die when they stop believing they can. I almost smiled. They didn't realize how close we all were to proving that true. When I moved again to Munich, it was raining. The water ran clean over the old stone, washing away names and years. My driver was quiet, polite, unaware of what rode in the seat beside him. I placed another device there, buried beneath concrete, near the heart of a theater where laughter would one day carry something unseen. Each time I finished a task, I felt my pulse slow. The guilt, if that's what it was, had dulled into something practical. I told myself I was saving us from ourselves. At night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the hum of ventilation systems, the hiss of air conditioning units, the soft churn of human breath. I thought of London next, of tunnels deep under the city, where the air never stops moving. I started to write again. Not reports, not data, just thoughts. I wanted someone to understand someday, not forgive. Just understand. The world was already sick. I was only giving it a cure it didn't want. London was colder than I remembered. The city never really sleeps. It just mutters. I walked the underground before dawn, watching the early workers drift past without seeing me. My reflection moved beside theirs in the train windows, pale and calm. I had already left my mark. Here, 6 devices hidden where the air gathers and spreads, each one timed to my watch, each one a quiet heartbeat counting down. When I reached the last station, I stopped at the platform edge and listened. The tunnels breathed like lungs. The air moved past my face, carrying the faint smell of metal and dust. Somewhere above, the river rolled slow and black. I realized then that I would never see what came after. That was the cost. I had accepted it. I took out my last note and tucked it behind a loose tile. where someone might find it or might not. My lungs burned. Maybe it had already begun. Maybe I had carried it longer than I thought. The train roared past, wind pressing against my face. For the first time I felt afraid, not of dying but of being forgotten. I closed my eyes and waited for the next breath.